We all know Beetlejuice is the ghost with the most. But we are going to take a look at a ghost who's a little less than most, some would say, kind of pathetic. Unless you're the little boy who's being terrified by it every single night. And then we travel to the Grand Canyon, one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. And for over a century, there have been rumors that the Grand Canyon is actually the resting place of ancient artifacts. But nestled inside that conspiracy theory is there something even darker at play inside the canyon. Is it possible that the Grand Canyon is currently the site of a war between the U.S. Army and giant spiders? Today on Dead Rabbit Radio.
Actually, I'm a lot freaked out.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys are having tons of fun doing whatever you're doing. We got a lot of stuff to cover today. So first off, running into Dead Rabbit Radio Command, everyone get on your feet and give it up for one of our legacy Patreon supporters, Brian Kim. Woohoo, yeah, he's running on in with his spider hunting gear. It's basically just big shoes. He's wearing Doc Martens. I can step on these spiders, right, Jason? They're giant, but, you know, give it your best shot, Brian. Brian is going to be our captain, our pilot this episode, because he has been a longtime member of the Patreon. Really appreciate all of that support. If you guys can't support the show financially through the Patreon or through the merch store, I truly understand. I really do. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. That is how you can help the show grow. Brian, I'm going to toss you the keys to the Jason Jalopy. Everyone climb on board as Brian fires up this rickety old chitty bang bang car. We're going to leave behind Dead Rabbit Radio Command. Brian, go ahead and drive us all the way out to Argentina. Nice leisurely drive down to Argentina. As we're headed out there, I want to do another shout out for Big Sky Paranormal Conference in Butte, Montana. I will be virtually speaking. I'll be doing a virtual presentation there. September 28th at Butte, Montana's Big Sky Paranormal Conference. It's so funny. I can never read this ad read without laughing, because I remember all the goofy mistakes I've made in previous ad reads, most famously listing the wrong city that it was taking place in. BigSkyParanormalCon.com is where you can go for tickets and more information. I will be speaking virtually. I will not be there in person. There people have thought that, and I'm just making that clear. I don't want people to show up and be like, I've always wanted to shake your hand. Not like anyone's ever said that, but you know what I mean. One person might in Montana being like, I've never shook anyone's hand. Maybe Jason's will be my first. It's virtual, but I don't want to undersell it, because I think that's dope. You're going to see my giant head floating around in a movie theater, probably, right? It might be a television set. I keep imagining it's this giant projector. They might wheel in a television set on a cart like an AV club in high school. But either way, you guys, if you show up, you will get, I mean, it's trying not to laugh. I really am looking forward to this conference, but you're like, Jason, it's kind of a hard sell, because now you're saying they're going to roll a cart in with your head. First off, sure, I'd love to see a giant Jason head floating in the darkness. And now it's like going to be a bunch of people gathered around a television set. It only turns up so loud. The guy's like, that's as loud as it's going to get. Even if you don't come to see me, even if something happens and the power goes out and I'm not able to appear virtually, I recommend all of you guys to look up local paranormal conferences and go to them. They are a hoot. You guys will have so much fun. If you're a fan of the show, look up local conferences in your area, because there is a bit of solitude that comes with this type of interest. There's not a lot of clubs. There's not a lot of groups to begin with. So if you guys can find a conference to go to, do it. You're going to have a ton of fun. I always have fun doing these things, virtually or not. BigSkyParanormalCon.com, September 28th through the 29th, 2024, in Butte, Montana. We're headed all the way out to Argentina, and we're about to meet a member of the Fluffle, listener of this show. Online, he goes by the name Austin Argy. He recently sent me this story. It's quite fascinating. Let's take a look at it. He had a pretty interesting read on it as well, his theory of what was going on. But before we get there, we're in Argentina. We're headed back in time to the year 2008-ish, somewhere around there, give or take a year. It's summertime. Austin, at this point, he's between the ages of 6 and 7, so he's a tiny guy. Back around 2008, Austin was sitting at home during this summer day when all of a sudden, poof, power goes out. Power goes out for the entire neighborhood, and it's out all day long, which Austin says wasn't unusual. It wasn't unusual. We had that in California during the grayouts, or brownouts, I think they were called, where you'd just be sitting at home because the power grid was so overtaxed. You'd be like, oh, are you kidding me? So I feel your pain, Austin, for just that first part, for that very first paragraph. We can relate with each other. But this time, when nighttime arrived, the power was still out. Walking around the house with candles, they're like, oh, guess what, Austin? The power's out, so that means no television, but why don't you cuddle up with Mommy for a good book? Come here, son, let's read To Kill a Mockingbird. Chapter 1, Scout and... Who was the other guy? She's all looking right at it. She can't read. She's like, the candle's getting perilously close to the pages. Oh, Mom, no. I'll never know what happens to the boot rattly now. The book burns up. Read a couple of books by candlelight. But eventually it's time for bed. So he goes to bed. Austin's laying in bed and he sees something in the darkness. On the edge of his bed, right? So not at the foot of the bed, but at the edge of the bed, he turns and he looks. And he sees this pale, green, glowing figure kind of poking its head over the edge of his bed. This pale, green, glowing, nebulous figure. It was taking the form of a humanoid. He could clearly see where the head would be and where the shoulders would be. But he also used the term shape-shifting. Because from his point of view, what it looked like was this creature, this organism, whatever you want to use to describe it as, a spirit, possibly. It looks like it's made out of gas. And it seems to be, while it's peeking over the edge of his bed, and Austin's very, very close to this thing. He's looking at it dead on at this point. He said that it appeared to be made of gas, and it was struggling to keep a humanoid form. The gas would start to shift one way, but it would force its way back into this humanoid head, and then a little bit of gas would start to leak off of the shoulder, and it would formulate back into where the shoulder would be. Whatever this thing was, it was expending a great amount of effort to remain human-like. It's doing that. It's trying to manifest itself as a human, while at the same time staring right at Austin as it's peeking over the edge of the bed. Well, Austin does what I think any kid would do, and I'd argue most adults. He screams at the top of his lungs. Like, yes, it is fascinating to see something try to enter the three-dimensional world from whatever lost realm it has emerged from. It's trying to maintain a physical form. But Austin's screaming at the top of his lungs kind of ruins the guy's concentration. A little rude, Austin. Austin screams at the top of his lungs, and his mother comes running into the room, and the glowing green gas man is gone. So Austin's sitting there, and he's laying in bed. His mom's like, dude, what are you talking about? There's no glowing guy in here. There's no one in here. I'm in here, and you're in here. Neither of us are glowing, so I'm going to leave. So the mom goes back to bed, and Austin's laying there. He's laying there on his side, and he begins to see something peek over the side of his bed. He once again begins to see something peek over the edge of his bed. This green, glowing form begins to appear, and he can feel its eyes just staring at him. There's no eyes that he can see, but he can still feel it. He can feel this nebulous form try to maintain a humanoid body and at the same time stare deep into Austin's soul. So Austin screams out loud, Mom, he's back, he's a green glowing guy. But every time the mom came in, the green dude was gone, and the mom left, the green guy showed back up. Same thing, Austin's laying there on his side, and he sees this green glowing guy appear and kind of like poke its head over the edge of the bed, staring at him. He said that you could tell that this thing had eyes. It basically had eye sockets where those would be. That was maintained, but he also said this creature or spirit was constantly contorting its face. It's trying to figure out where these facial pieces go. It's kind of like a Mr. Potato Head, except you're 7 years old. It's right next to your bed, and it disappears when your mom shows up. And the word that Austin uses was incomprehensibly contorting its face, which is an interesting word because he's looking at something that should not exist at all. It's not a ghost. That's why I use words like spirit or creature, because these are inaccurate terms for it. We don't know what it is. It may become one of those things by the end of the story, and that's where the whole story's interesting, but we're just getting started. But he's watching this thing, and the way it's trying to control where its facial features are, that's something that you don't ever observe in nature. That's something that you rarely ever observe in a movie or a comic book or a television show. So it wouldn't make sense that it was incomprehensible when you're trying to watch someone maintain their face, and in doing that is causing all of these horrific contortions. But Austin's a little less, this is stuff he wrote me this YouTube comment like a week ago, right? He's had many years to think about this. At the time, he's not watching it and being like, oh, the world of the supernatural sure is bizarre. No, he's screaming at the top of his lungs. His mom runs in. He's not appreciating the beauty of it. He's just terrified by the entire event. He screams at the top of his lungs. His mom runs in. This goes on for 3 to 4 hours, right? This guy keeps waking him up. He keeps screaming for his mom. There are other people in the house, too, and they're, telling the mom, you gotta shut that kid up, because I'm telling you right now, if that kid wakes me up one more time, I don't even know how anyone got to sleep in the first place. But for the next 3 to 4 hours, he's screaming constantly, Mom, the green guy's back. Mom runs in, it's nothing. There's nothing there. After 3 to 4 hours pass, the mom goes, you know what? I think I've kind of solved this problem for everyone. The rest of the family's about to butcher you. But why don't I sleep in your room, son? Since this quote-unquote green glowing guy disappears when I show up, what if I'm always here? So I'm going to sleep in your room. That could work, right? Austin's thinking that could work. She doesn't sleep in his bed. Maybe make your mom sleep on the floor or something like that. That's kind of messed up, but maybe he had a big comfy chair for her to sleep in the room. But anyway, so the mom comes into the room to sleep, and you figure, okay, cool, the green glowing guy's not going to show back up. I did like this part. Austin said after the mom came to sleep in the room, he made a decision to simply roll over in his bed and stop facing the edge of the bed. And I thought, why didn't you do that 3 or 4 hours ago? I get it. Maybe you don't want to turn your back on this incomprehensible creature. But maybe that might have been an easier choice than screaming for 4 hours. His voice is all throaty. He's like, Mom, I think the green guy is making my throat bleed. And they're like, no, that's just you yelling, screaming at the top of your lungs every 5 minutes. The green guy didn't do that. He says, I'll just roll over in my bed, and now the mom's sleeping in here and she can watch my back. I'm going to roll over in bed and face the wall. And when he does that, now his back is to the edge of the bed, he feels a mist spray onto his back. Psst. He said it felt like if someone took a perfume bottle and sprayed you with it. What's interesting is even when the mom was in there, he said that the figure would still show up. He goes, the green figure kept showing up until dawn. And once the sun rose, then the green glowing guy was no longer in there. So I imagine that when he got sprayed, he goes, well, I have a choice. I gotta either keep getting sprayed in the back by a refreshing mist on a hot Argentina night, or I can roll over and face the growing knowledge that we are not alone in the multiverse, and there's all sorts of horrific things beyond our sight waiting to devour us. I mean, I'll just roll over and see the monster man. So he says that the green guy kept showing up until dawn, even though his mom was sleeping in the room. But he probably just stopped yelling. Mom, wake up, the green guy's here. Like, he doesn't have to yell anymore. She's in the room. So the green guy's gone. Right? He had a whole night during this power outage of this green glowing guy showing up, and he was there until dawn, and then he disappeared. We've covered stories before about blue glowing people. There was one guy, I think he was made out of electricity, if I remember correctly. He was like running through the power lines and he cut the power to the area. I'll put that episode in the show notes. We've covered stories before, not a ton, but of entities showing up during times of like power outages. And it's always been implied that they possibly caused the outage themselves. And you could classify this as something like that. But like I said, we're just getting started. This turns out to only be the first form of an entity that would stalk poor Austin for quite a while. But even before the second form arrives, he goes, the next morning I felt off. Could have been the fact that I was up all night screaming, didn't get any sleep. But he said he started having this issue where he would hear noise. He would hear this, he said it was like noise. It was just constant noise. He said it was like as if someone had put a radio inside of your ear. And you can't shut it off. Which would be cool. I mean, we do that now, right? We invented that. I can put a little thing in my ear and I can listen to some cool music, right? While dancing down the street to Sabrina Carpenter. But it's not cool like that. It's just, he says it's like having a radio in your ear. Imagine that, but you can't change the channel and it's 10 different channels at once. It's like NPR, so there's like some guy giving a talk about politics, and then there's a bluegrass festival in town and they're doing live broadcasts from there. And then there's like a dude giving like trumpet lessons. It's like, Jason, you're picking the most annoying possible things. And in your other ear, it's the sound of porcupines having sex. It would suck, though. It would suck if you couldn't control the noise inside of your ears. Anyways, so he kept having this issue that he can hear these radios in his ear. And coming up next, another 5 hours of the Bluegrass Festival. We're repeating, it was so popular the first time, we're repeating the last 5 hours. Ah! Shortly after that, though, Austin says that while he was laying in bed at night, he would see, on the edge of his bed, coming up over the side, a feminine-looking hand. Full flesh and blood hand reach up over the side of the bed and grab his shoulder. And he would scream. And it disappeared. Literally anywhere else other than my bed. Austin says he did develop a deep-seated fear of sleeping alone and sleeping in the dark. And obviously, right? I think anyone would. But over time, the sightings of the hand, remember it was night after night after night after night for 6 months to a year. Over time, though, the sightings became less frequent. And then they stopped altogether. But that is not the end of his saga, because shortly after the hand stopped appearing, every so often, around 3 a.m, Austin would be deep asleep. No more gas guys, no more women's hands. He'd be deep asleep, and he would hear, oh. You're like, what is his parents doing? I know those walls might be kind of thin in that house. No, it's not what you're thinking. He'd hear a, oh. Like, Jason, there's only one thing I can think of when you do that. He would hear the sound of heavy breathing. But he said it was so loud, he used the term blasting through the room. And he also said that it was this threatening tone. It was like a threatening breathing. Which, I'm going to put on my actor garb. I used to be an actor way back in the day. Stage actor, not none of those lame-o on television nerds. Here we go. I'm imagining a threat in front of me. I'm imagining two guys are trying to make me go to the Bluegrass Festival, and I'm not going to take it. I go, oh, oh, oh. And the two guys back off. And scene. Maybe it's like that. Maybe it's like, now my throat's bleeding. I'm like, I'm hyperventilating. Oh, where's my inhaler? Threatening, heavy, loud breathing every so often at 3 a.m. It's funny because at this point, remember what happened before this? A green glowing man was showing up, only for one night to be fair. Then 6 months to a year with this hand. It's the loud breathing. The family goes, oh, you know what? I forgot about something. We're Catholic, right? We're Catholic. We know a priest. Let's have them bless the place. So they do. They go to the local church and they consult a priest. And eventually a priest and 2 assistants show up to the house and they cleanse the home. Which I don't know why they didn't do that during day 8 of the woman's hand grabbing him. They're like, this will be a good learning experience for him. Everyone has to get grabbed by a phantom hand every once in a while. It was the loud breathing that they said, okay, let's put a stop to this. And the cleansing, the noises continued, but they were far less frequent than they had been before. But they're still going on, and the mom tells Austin, hey, you know what, honey? I don't know why I didn't say this that night where the green glowing guy was showing up. You would have saved everyone a whole lot of trouble, especially me. Why don't you just pray? Like, if you're so worried about this phantom threatening breath, why don't you pray? And he goes, my family is Catholic, but they never really forced me to be Catholic or anything like that. He goes, I never prayed. I never prayed myself. So he did that. He goes, one night he prayed to Jesus and to his guardian angel to protect him. And at that point, all activity ceased in his room. Now, on the one hand, you could go, this is an interesting, just a ghost story, right? It's the story of a young boy being tormented by spirits. And he uses prayer to, banish them. That, honestly, that type of story is a dime a dozen. Sorry, Austin's all crying. He's like, oh, I'm so sad. The pivotal experience of my life. Jason said it was lame. I'm not saying it's lame, like I often say with paranormal stories. I read them and I go, oh, that's kind of interesting. But to the person who's experiencing them, they're the most terrifying 6 months to a year of their lives. I'm not saying that his story's lame. I think his story's absolutely fascinating because it goes above and beyond just a ghost inhabiting a house and a young boy praying it and it leaves. Because those stories are all over the place. What makes Austin's story particularly interesting was because now he's 23 years old. He looks back on this and he said, this is what I think. Like, now that I no longer am afraid of any of these entities killing me in the middle of the night and stealing my flesh to become reborn in this world. He goes, what I think of is the first night that this showed up, leading all the way to the moaning breaths, it was the same entity, and it was trying to become solid in our world. It was trying to manifest itself into our reality. In the sense that he was watching that ghost for the first time, instead of just being this mist or this unseen entity, it was trying to maintain a physical form, and it was doing it with so much effort that he could watch it. He could see this thing struggle to become a solid, maybe not even solid, but a physical ghost. And we've talked about it before on this show. It's actually very, very rare for even an experienced ghost hunter to see a physical manifestation of a ghost. It's super rare because the amount of power it takes to create a 3D image from your soul, right? Now you're just this soul or this spirit. To create this form takes so much energy. With this spirit, he goes, and I kind of agree with this too, is that it was trying to manifest for the first time. It was trying to take that form. And it could have first been able to generate any sort of energy from the power outage. From whatever was going on outside of the home, it could have been able to generate from that. I'm not saying it caused the power outage, but maybe it had nothing to do with that. But then remember the green glowing head and the shoulders, this humanoid form trying to appear, it vanishes. But what happens in its place is all it is now is a hand. It's a fully formed human hand. You can tell the flesh of it. You can see the fingers. There's enough detail that Austin's able to say it was a feminine hand. But there was nothing connected to that hand. And the idea that he has, and again, I think this is pretty astute, is that it could not, whatever this entity was, could not maintain the form of a full human as it wanted to. It could only create itself as a human hand. It could do a very detailed hand, it could do a crudely drawn arm and shoulder, or it could do a really messy and constantly contorting full body. And this hand was reaching up and grabbing this boy. And then eventually it just became the moaning. The loud, threatening breathing. And that was its end. Which is interesting because normally those happen in reverse. Normally you hear a ghost far before you see one. So you think, did he witness the birth, life, and death of a spirit? Death in the sense that it may have just dissipated into nothing, or maybe it just moved on to another home. But it tried to form itself in our world, it just couldn't maintain its shape. It didn't have the energy that it needed to do that, so instead it became a hand. To be fair, the green glowing form, as terrifying as it was, if it tried to grab Austin, it most likely wouldn't be able to grip onto him. It was a gaseous form. But this hand, it was able to create a hand that could grab onto people, but that's all it could muster. It was a very detailed hand. And then in the end, it just could not maintain its power level and was beginning to fade off into moaning and groaning until eventually, once Austin prayed to Jesus, that stopped as well. It's a fascinating story, and it also goes to the idea that this form, this figure, this spirit, which I think is a pretty good guess, was trying to terrify. It had a mission. It wasn't appearing to any of the other people as far as we knew. I'm sure they were all making fun of Austin every single day for screaming in the middle of the night. It seemed like it was bent on terrifying him. And it may have been trying to use his fear, his psychic terror that, he's just totally freaking out, as energy to feed off of. It could have been trying to scare him. He may have been the youngest in the house. He may have been the most vulnerable. He may have had a younger sibling who's a little tougher than Austin is. He's like, I don't care about green, glowing gas guys. Bring it on. Austin's sitting there, he's sobbing in the morning. Everyone's like, oh, yeah, I would totally. It's in a couple of gas guys in my room. I'd beat him up. He's like, you don't understand. It's so terrifying. Let a woman's hand grab you in the middle of the night. And the dad's like, oh, yeah, son, do you mind if we change rooms? It could have been trying to feed off of his energy. It could have just been cruel in trying to scare him. We did that episode a long time ago, Why Are Ghosts Scary? Where a kid does say that the reason why the ghost is constantly scaring him and everyone in the house, the ghost told him it's scary to be dead. It's absolutely terrifying to be dead and lost, so they want to scare other people too. They want humans to feel like a ghost does, constantly on edge and terrified of what's coming next. It could have been that. I Definitely don't think whatever it was friendly, because it knew it was scaring him and it just kept doing it, and it was doing it so repeatedly, especially that first night. It could have been trying to feed off of his psychic fear. Fascinating story, though. We may have been able to get within the course of over a year the life cycle of a spirit, its birth, its concrete form, and then its eventual fading off into nothingness. It may have just burnt itself out so much on being in that physical form. Because again, it normally takes so long for that stuff. Most ghost researchers, most people who spend their life hunting these things, are not going to be grabbed or pushed by a ghost. It's very interesting because Austin sent me this story. He's been listening to the podcast for a while, but I'd recently done an episode about disembodied hands. And I've done a lot of episodes about disembodied hands over the years. It is a phenomenon that is mostly, like 99% of cases I've ever come across that have phantom hands are Mexico, Central America, and South America. And I don't know why that is. There's one phantom hand story in Britain. We covered that. I'll put all this stuff in the show notes. But every other story we've had, phantom hands grabbing kids while they're sleeping, chasing kids up the stairs, trying to drag kids into the bushes. These disembodied hands, they end around the, what's that thing called? Forearm. They end around the forearm or the wrist, appearing out of nowhere and grabbing people. That is a phenomenon that is very, very common in Mexico, South America, Central America. Those are stories that we almost only hear in those regions. They're not something that I had ever heard of in decades of paranormal research happening in North America. So it's very interesting. He sent this story over and once again has a phantom hand in it. So I don't know what that part of the phenomenon is. Brian, we're going to have to wait on the Arizona spider story. Let me go ahead and see what else I got, if I got a short one, because that one lasted longer than I thought. Let's see here. Here's an interesting one. This is an interesting one. Okay, to be fair, it's not as interesting as the U.S. Army fighting giant spiders in the Grand Canyon, okay? I'll be totally honest. It's not that interesting. I just don't have enough time to tell that story. So instead, yes, in there, you have your I Love Spiders shirt. Actually, no, if you love spiders, you should not want to hear that one. You should not want to hear about the U.S. Army blowing up spiders. Because you love spiders. You're like, Jason, nobody loves spiders. Nobody. Nobody wants to have sex with a spider. We're just going to have to save that one for tomorrow. Because I want to spend more time talking about it. I don't have enough time. But let's talk about this one. Brian's all disappointed. He goes, I love spiders. I actually am an arachna. What would be someone who loves spiders? What's the Greek term for love? Phileo is brotherly, right? Like phileo fish. Agape is... whatever. Anyways, Brian, leave your spider-loving fetish at home. I'm going to toss you the keys to the world-famous Carpenter Copter. Everyone climb on board. Brian is disappointed, as I'm sure most of you are. You're like, this has nothing to do with us wanting to have sex with spiders. I wanted to hear about the U.S. Army shooting them in the brain. Well, tune in tomorrow. Brian, let's go ahead and take this Carpenter Copter up out of Argentina. Why don't you fly us all the way out to a furniture sales store? You're like, is the furniture made of webbing? Is the salesman a spider? Nope. Brian lands the Carpenter Copter at this furniture sales store, and we're all sitting there, and we're wearing like our button-up shirts and ties and slacks as Muzak is playing over the loudspeaker. You're like, Jason, damn it, if this story takes longer. You say you don't have enough time, and now you're doing a musical Muzak rendition of Sabrina Carpenter. You're like checking your watch. You're like, if this story takes too long, you don't have time to do the spider one. Yeah, you do, Jason. Anyways, we're standing in the furniture sales store. Sabrina Carpenter's playing over the generic music, loudspeakers. No one's shopping. We're just standing there. We're about to meet this guy. We're going to call him Mark. And he's like, hey guys, you sell any furniture today? And we're like, yeah, not really. I mean, like, a guy came in to look at a chair, but that's all he did. He kind of looked at it. He walked away. Yeah, it's kind of hard to sell furniture because nowadays people can just make their own. Mark's like, yeah, I had that happen the other day. I had a guy show up with measuring tape and he measured a couch. And then I saw him go out to his truck and he made a couch. He had a workshop in there. You know, that's crazy. That's way more exciting. That sounds way more exciting than spiders. Mark's like, yes, definitely. It'd be hard selling furniture nowadays. Everyone can go on YouTube and learn how to lacquer a chair or finish a stool or drill through a sofa bed. But we're the true leaders of the industry, us furniture salespeople. And then Mark's like, see you guys later, I'm off. Mark leaves the furniture store and goes home. Well, later that night, Mark has a dream. And in this dream, he's standing at his house, and an old work colleague of his, a man named Steve, who used to work at the furniture sales store, in the dream, he shows up driving a truck, and on the truck is a car trailer, and on top of that is a digger, like a construction vehicle built for digging. And Steve jumps out of his truck and goes, Mark, how you doing? I haven't seen you in a while. Mark's like, yeah, I haven't seen you since you quit the exciting world of furniture sales. And he's like, yeah, you know, you gotta go where the excitement is. I'm going to Arizona. I just joined the U.S. Army. And Mark's like, wow, sounds fascinating. Steve goes, you know what? Yeah, we haven't seen each other, but I was wondering if I could ask you a favor. You remember my son? We'll call him Clark. We don't have his exact name. You remember my son Clark? He used to work with us. Mark's like, yeah, I do remember Clark. Worked at the furniture store with us. He goes, yeah. He says hi. It's been a while since we've all met, but I was wondering if you could do me a favor. I know it's kind of weird, but you see this digger? You see this piece of construction equipment back here, this digger? And Mark's like, yeah, I see it. Steve goes, could you keep an eye on it for me? Can you look after this for me? Yeah, sure, I can watch your construction equipment, your digger. And Steve's like, yeah, thanks. Just needed you to keep an eye on it, buddy. Well, Mark wakes up. And he goes, what a weird dream. He goes, one, I hadn't seen Steve in a long time, or his son. And we worked at a furniture sales store. What a weird dream. He showed up with a piece of construction equipment. Odd. Well, the next day, Mark goes to work, and he sees one of his co-workers sitting at his desk. We'll call this guy Adam. He sees Adam just sitting at his desk. Mark walks up and goes, Adam, what are you doing, you big old lazy bum? You're sitting at your desk on this, the most fast-paced day of furniture sales? Furniture Palooza? And Adam's just like sitting there. He's all slumped over. Mark's like, come on, you big bum. Get up. We gotta move them furniture pieces. And Adam just looks at Mark and goes, Have you not heard the news, dude? Have you heard about Steve? Mark's like, well, Steve? Huh? Yeah, Adam says. Last night around 8 p.m., he was at home. And he was in his garage when it burst into flames. Steve was yelling. He's like, get me out of here. But his family couldn't get to him. The fire was so intense. Steve was fighting against the flames. He couldn't get out of the garage. His family couldn't rescue him. And the flames burned so intensely. He died, Mark. He burned to death in his own house. Mark goes, oh man, that sounds absolutely horrifying. That's like one of the worst ways to die, I guess. And Mark goes, oh my God, like that's crazy. He died at 8 p.m. and then later that night I had a dream when he was giving me a digger. Are the two things connected? And then he realizes that they are. Because what he finds out is that Clark, Mark's son, He used to work at the furniture store. You're sitting there, you're like, Jason, this better be exciting, bro. This better be giant spider exciting. Did his son turn into a giant spider? Is that why there's a digger? Is he trying to dig through the earth to find his eggs? Mark realizes that Steve died the same night he had this dream, and he hadn't dreamt or really even thought about this guy for quite a while. Mark also finds out that Clark, Steve's son, he used to work at the furniture store. Now he works a construction job. And he drives a digger. He drives a little construction vehicle. Moving the dirt, digging it up. Moving some more dirt. And Mark, when he wrote this up online underneath the name Lance Uppercut 76, he said, quote, I can only think that he, meaning Steve, I can only think that he wants me to look out for his son. Blew my mind. Big time. So, wow. What an amazing... I'm not done. I'm not done. But what an amazing story, right? Brian Kim's all sitting there. He's like holding a stuffed spider. He's like, I don't know. Could have been better. Well, here's the thing. One is a prophetic dream. That definitely makes sense. You could see that happening. The father showing up after he's dead, right? He would have died before this dream. Mark has this dream of this guy saying, hey, I want you to keep an eye on this digger for me. And the digger represented the son. I think we're all on board with that. But, okay, so let's say you had that dream. It would have been easier if Steve showed up and said, hey, I want you to keep an eye on my son, rather than this imagery. Would you keep an eye on this digger for me? But whatever. Mark was savvy enough to figure it out. This man, after he died, went to an old work colleague through the world of the unconscious to deliver this message. I mean, hours after the guy died, right? He died at 8 p.m., and then a couple hours later, an old work colleague, they weren't even best friends. He said, you know what, he's looking through the multiverse as Mark's soul is flying around, and he goes, oh, yeah, Mark. That guy always cracked me up with his furniture-related jokes. I want him to look after my son. Steve flew into Mark's brain and gave him that dream. Out of all the people that Steve's talked to throughout his life, he chose Mark to look after his son. Okay, that's weird, but whatever. Here's the thing. You are Mark. You get this message from a guy that you haven't seen in a couple years on the night he dies, a couple hours after he dies, as his soul is floating around. He talks to you and says, will you look after my son? Will you keep an eye on my son? He didn't go to his best man at his wedding. He didn't go to his grandpa or his uncle or anyone. Steve chose Mark. So you should feel like you might have I guess you can see where this is going, right? You'd feel like you'd have at least a tiny bit of an obligation to keep an eye on this dead dude's son. Well, when Mark posted this online, somebody asked the question, because, you know, this story took place a while ago, goes, wow, have you kept in touch with the son? Like, are you doing what his soul asked you to do? And no, he's not. He doesn't even know where the dude is now. He goes, nah, I don't know. The kid moved out of state. I haven't seen him. In a while. I haven't talked to him in a while. In fact, Mark says, you know what would kind of be a kick in the pants? I never even told him about that time his dead father appeared to me the night he died and wanted me to look after his digger. And the digger represented the son. I never even told him that. Maybe I should tell him that story someday. But I don't know where he's at. I don't know his phone number or his address. So, whatever. You want to buy some furniture? So this is what's so bizarre about this story. You are given a message from beyond the grave, and you don't do it. I find that absolutely... I mean, here's the thing. If tonight you have a dream and there's a bloody skeleton arises from the earth and says, find 7 virgins, bring their hearts to me. I'm not saying that you have to follow every order from beyond the grave. You're like, oh man, 7 virgins in my neighborhood, this is going to be hard. obviously, I'm not saying any time of the voice of the damned and the dead speak to you, you got to do what you say. But he knew this guy. You got to do what they say. But he knew this dude. It's so bizarre to me to hold two thoughts at once. One, that a man hours after he died visited me in the middle of the night to ask me to watch his son. And then two, to not care at all what happens to the guy's son. To the point where he doesn't even know where the kid's at. I mean, he's an adult now. He was an adult back then, too. He was driving a digger. He worked at a construction site. But it's so weird to me. I'm not saying I would be like, hey, call me daddy. I'm your new daddy. Trying to give him a hug at the funeral. Come here, Clark. Our names even sound alike. This was destined to be. I'm not saying you have to be his new dad. I'm just saying that, I would tell the dream, I'd be like, at the funeral, or maybe after the funeral, right? Don't want to be tacky. Make it all about myself. They're all giving the eulogy. I was like, yeah, get out of here, priest. Let me tell you guys a story. I was in the U.S. Army. I was stationed in the Grand Canyon. Then I was like, it's going to take too long. Let me tell you another story. I had a dream, Clark. I had a dream the night your father burned to death. You're like all reenacting it. He died like this. Ah! Screaming. You're like, okay, that's over. But Clark, I had a dream your father came to me with a digger on a car trailer. And he asked me to watch after the digger. And then I woke up. Isn't that weird? See, Clark, you were the digger. That was the dream. So I'm going to keep an eye on you, son. Is that too forward? Can I call you son now? I'm gonna do it anyways. It's so weird that you get this message and then you don't do it. A man asks you to keep an eye on his family and you're like, wow, that was weird. And then you don't keep an eye on his family. And the reason why I keep hitting it home was because he could have appeared to anybody. He appeared for some reason. He thought Mark would be the best guy to keep an eye on his son. And he's totally whiffed that. The one duty he's gotten from beyond the realm of death itself, he's just like, I don't know where that guy's at. Hopefully he's doing well. Hopefully he's not currently burning to death in a carport. Crazy, right? What would you do if you had a dream asking you to do something and you just stopped doing it? I'd at least have the guy's phone number. If the kid's moving out of town, I was like, hey, kid, did I ever tell you that story about your dad coming? Yeah, you told me that story. You interrupted the funeral. And you've told me that story every week since. Yeah, no, it's a good story. I agree. But kid, before you leave, you got like multiple restraining orders against him. He just won't leave this guy alone. He's all trying to drive the son around like a digger. He's like, you're a digger. He's just like making the kid dig with his hands. You're sitting on his back. Wee! Thanks, Steve. Thanks for this brand new digger. Kicking him in the ribs. Dig faster, son. Yeah, at least have the guy's phone number. At least have this guy's phone number. At least keep an eye on him. He's failing in his one duty that an old friend asked him to do. So it's an interesting ghost story, but it's also just kind of sad. It's kind of a sad ending. I hope the son's doing well, but we don't know because this guy doesn't know. And it's his job. He was given one thing to look after on this earth, and he just doesn't care. Absolutely fascinating story, I say, and you agree. I won you over, even though it didn't have any spiders in it. But tomorrow's episodes will have spiders in it. Maybe I'll make it a spider-packed episode, put 2 spider stories in it, just to satiate all of you eight-legged loving freaks out there. You want to love a spider? Well, tune in tomorrow. Dead Rabbit Radio, and if you don't like spiders too, a bunch of them get murdered, so tune in tomorrow for that as well. deadrabbitradio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at facebook.com/deadrabbitradio. TikTok is @deadrabbitradio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal conspiracy and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today.